Hello and welcome to the Nomiki Show. I am Nomiki Konst and it is Thursday, June 24th, 2021, and I am coming to you live from Astoria, New York. Astoria, Queens, New York. That is my hometown. And usually we don't air live from Astoria. When we're in New York, we air from Brooklyn. But in this magical time that we live in, sort of post-pandemic, we're still sort of navigating how to film on the road and also post-pandemic. I say this because today, officially, New York declared the pandemic is over. There's going to be a march in New York City, a parade for frontline workers. There are going to be fireworks all over the city. In just a couple of days in Astoria Park, where very close to where I am, there are going to be fireworks. So that is the state of the pandemic here in New York City, where just over half of New Yorkers are vaccinated. And as we are talking about these variants, which I guess, the science out there is saying that the variants are slightly less, if you've been vaccinated, you're most likely not going to be able to take on the variant. So fascinating times that we live in. Walking around New York, it's like the pandemic doesn't exist, but you get into a ride share, you got to wear masks still. So it's hard to kind of navigate where the rules apply, why they apply, when they apply, and not. With that being said, I have a few updates for you today. We're not going to do a traditional opening today because we are going to be announcing that the show is going to shift a little bit. For those of you who watch a lot of lefty shows, who have regular schedules, you know that sometimes, especially earlier on in the show, in the show's life, there's some shifting in strategy and when shows air and how they air. And of course, we're on multiple platforms. We don't just air on YouTube, and we air on Twitch as well. So hey, everybody on Twitch. And we're in podcast form. We're on Patreon and fans and iTunes and all the different places. And we're going to start airing on a few other platforms very soon as well. So with that being said, great news for some of you and depending on what your habits are. Starting next week, we are shifting our show to twice a week. And how we're doing that is you're going to get a longer show those 2 days a week. It's going to be in the evening live premiered. And then we, of course, will break things up into pieces throughout the week so you can watch different segments individually, just like we do right now. And of course, for podcast listeners, you get a longer podcast twice a week rather than having one daily. Why are we doing this? A lot of reasons. And when I initially came up with the idea of the show, I wanted to do it once a week and do a longer show. But the way that, the algorithm gods operate, they really, especially as we launched right before the pandemic, it was a very hard time to launch a show. So we did all we could to work with the algorithm gods, and the algorithm gods were saying, do it live daily. So we did it 4 days a week, as you guys know, but I am not a full-time YouTuber. I have personally other duties in my life. I have other jobs. Most notably, I think many of you know, I've been on the road filming a documentary in Puerto Rico. I'm also on the board of an organization called Matriarch, and both of these things have required a lot more of Nomi lately, and it's very hard to manage when you're midday having to do a show that you love to do. So we tried to compromise and figure out how are we going to do this. So starting on Wednesday, yes, we are going to be airing this show, similar format, a few different segments that are going to be new. We're airing it at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, and it's going to be a 2-hour show on Wednesdays and Fridays. So 5 Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern to 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday and Friday. And that'll be on YouTube Live and on Twitch as well. And we are going to, of course, be releasing it in podcast form as well. And with that, I'll also announce another platform that we're going on next week. But it's very exciting for me. We're going to do some deeper dives, not as much, daily news stuff, which is great. But I personally love the deeper dives, stories. We're going to have longer interviews. We're going to have some fun segments also. We're going to stick with Femme Fridays. So your Friday, you're getting a Femme Friday, and on Wednesday, it's going to be, the politics day. And don't forget, on Mondays, right here on this channel, we air the committee program with Arun Chaudhary, who is on the show today. So we'll talk a little bit later with Arun Chaudhary. First up, though, we have Luke Savage on today. He's going to talk about Biden, and lots of news today with Biden, because Biden has come to a deal with the infrastructure bill. And we're just hearing now that there might be a conversation about student debt relief and free college with reconciliation. So it's a great day to have Luke Savage on, because he wrote a piece in Jacobin last month, said Joe Biden is not a radical. I can't believe we even have to say this stuff out loud, but we do, because people think it. So Luke is going to be on first, and then a little bit later we have Arun Chaudhary on, who's going to join us to talk about some of the stuff that's happening in the news today. Britney Spears, she's all the rage right now. Free Britney, free Palestine. I'm loving these memes that are going up, and the graffiti, the street art that's out there. And Run and I are going to talk about how we will be airing a special show in person somewhere. That's a little teaser. That's another announcement. Another reason why we had to change the show up a little bit is because of my travel schedule. Now that we can travel and do things. So very excited. Make sure to set your calendars. I don't know how you do it right now. If you're subscribed, you'll get the alert. But we're going to be airing Wednesdays and Fridays, 8 p.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern, Wednesday and Friday. All right, we will be right back after this break with Luke Savage.
Hi, Nomiki. Can you hear me?
I hear you, Luke. Your mic's hot, just so you know. We're live. All right, welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Luke Savage is, of course, a staff writer at Jacobin. He has also, I didn't know this about you, Luke. This is pretty cool, so I'm going to share it. Not only was he a staffer at Queen's Park and for a member of Parliament in Canada, he's based in Toronto, he was a candidate for the Ontario New Democratic Party in the provincial election in 2014. Wait, I feel like I should be talking to you about that instead of Joe Biden. Like,
not a very successful one, I would hasten to add.
You were early. It was like early in the game. There's still time. Do you have DSA in Toronto? Like, how does that work? No?
No, it's a different country. We don't have it.
I understand that. I understand, but it's a movement. So
That's right. Yeah. And actually, the NDP did win the seat in the following election. So if I'd stuck around again, who knows? We might not be having this conversation. But I'm glad to be having it.
Well, listen, I grew up in Buffalo, so Toronto was always my it was the cool place to go if you wanted to escape your parents and cross the border and go drink. So I get it. All right. So Joe Biden's not a radical. Today, this was just breaking news since we started the show. There's this infrastructure deal that he has made with Republicans, shocker. Also word that, there's going to be some sort of student debt relief with reconciliation. Tell me, you wrote this piece like over a month ago, but I don't feel like anything, maybe some new things have happened since then, but I feel like we're on the same page that Joe Biden is not a radical. Why did you have to remind us that?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's pretty remarkable that was ever considered a kind of radical or controversial statement in itself. But there has been a narrative, not just since the election, but I guess really going all the way back to the end of the Democratic primaries, that this wasn't your grandfather's Joe Biden. This is in fact, we were entering kind of a new phase of American liberalism that was going to be quite different from either Joe Biden's past, or kind of the past of the Obama administration, as we'd come to kind of understand the way Democrats do things. And people may think I'm exaggerating, but if you look at some of the headlines, months and months and months of headlines at big outlets, big publications. Is Joe Biden really the second coming of FDR and LBJ? Can Joe Biden achieve an FDR-style presidency? A historian sees surprising parallels. Some of them have been very, just outright declarative. They haven't even sort of bothered with the question, even though the question mark, I think, has always been kind of a rhetorical one. So, Ezra Klein wrote a piece called 4 Ways of Looking at the Radicalism of Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a transformative president. That was David Brooks.
Already.
Yeah, that's right. Already a transformative president. There's one, I believe, in the Atlantic, Welcome to the New Progressive Era. So, this has been, there's been, I think, a fairly broad consensus on this since at least the end of the Democratic primaries, which, saw the most conservative candidate win. I think it's safe to say that Biden, unlike a lot of the other, there were a lot of centrists on stage. The vast majority of the Democratic field I would characterize as centrist or even kind of center right. But others did at least kind of bother to go through the motions of, at least rhetorically endorsing some things. If Bernie Sanders had an idea that was popular, they would have to kind of triangulate their language and figure out a way to sort of try to co-opt it without really co-opting it or whatever. Biden, for the most part, didn't really do that. And yet, when the primaries ended, all of a sudden, there's this narrative that Biden is going to be a transformative president, and that's continued. Even after the Democrats got, after those Georgia runoffs, this very thin majority in the Senate, having had their majority in the House reduced, I think, by 5 seats in November. And obviously, there's a lot of kind of intricate and not very interesting debate to be had about what can the Democrats realistically do. What is the best case scenario when they don't have majorities that are anything like the ones that FDR had. But I think that's kind of a secondary question, compared to like what is Joe Biden trying to do? What is kind of the center of his actual agenda? What is the spirit of that agenda? And I just don't see a lot of radicalism there. I don't see a lot of evidence that, forget being in a new progressive era, I don't really see much evidence that there's any kind of concerted attempt underway to kind of get us there.
I have this theory and a couple of theories about him. So first, something like the infrastructure bill. I was like, oh my God, this is transformative. First off, it's not transformative, well, as we're seeing the details right now. But simultaneously, I think, as this new liberal party, New Dems, DLC, you pick the crew, as the neoliberals essentially took over the Democratic Party. He came up, he got into office at 28, or he was elected at 28, he got into the Senate at 30. Back then, though, the infrastructure bill, actually before, frankly, Obama, would not have been controversial. And so I think on issues like infrastructure, for instance, he is able to be a little bit more spendy because it wasn't anything that was controversial until Obama. But on other issues, you name it, Israel, free college, etc., he is not able to flex his muscles because it's not how he was conditioned. So I feel like what I'm personally seeing in Joe Biden is the areas where he feels safe, spending money. It's not reflective of this crisis, which obviously there's a real need to spend money in places that they cannot, there's no way they can get around it. It's like all the excuses that they've been making forever, suddenly, we can't afford to do XYZ thing, because he has to deal with it. But simultaneously, the things that he's choosing to deal with are the things that, 10, 15 years ago were not controversial, even in a fairly conservative Democratic Party. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think a lot of what's fueling this narrative is these numbers that people are seeing that are getting thrown around attached to these infrastructure bills. The American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion. That was the package passed, and I think it was January. People see numbers like that, and to be fair, that was, I think, about it's about 30, just over 30% larger than the stimulus plan that Obama passed, and so people see numbers like that, then they see the numbers that get have been tossed around since then around the American Families Plan, the American Jobs Plan, sort of these subsequent phases of infrastructure spending, and the numbers sound so kind of they sound so large that they I think it's easy to be a little misled about what a lot of this stuff actually means. I mean, you were just talking about Biden feels kind of room to maneuver on some of this stuff, and that's true. And the reasons for that, I think, are quite important. I mean, that this 1.9 trillion plan. There was an open letter from 170 business leaders, including the CEOs of Goldman Sachs, Google, Lyft, Visa, a whole bunch of others, who signed a letter in support of that bill, which it's very important to note was actually smaller than the CARES Act, which was around 2.2 trillion, I think, which was passed by Donald Trump just under a year, passed under the Congress the year before while Trump was president. And so there has been a shift in terms of there's not the same opposition to spending from these business groups, but so I think the character of the spending is a little different and kind of what it means. And we're not seeing spending, we're not seeing long-term commitments is on any of the stuff. Biden ran on these things which were supposed to be kind of fixed programs that were going to be built now and would kind of last into the future. And you're seeing less and less talk about that kind of stuff. You're not seeing the public option has not been a priority in any of these discussions, for example. Even some of the better things like the tax credits, the child tax credits, passed with the American Rescue Plan, those are going to expire in a year. So when we talk about a transformative presidency, a radical presidency, if those words mean anything, to me at least, they mean a presidency that kind of reshapes the political consensus in some way, perhaps creates new programs that are lasting. Social Security is an example of that. The suite of programs passed during the Great Society reforms in the LBJ era. Those are an example of that too. And I just don't see anything akin to those things in the Biden presidency. Not so far.
Yeah, it does seem like it's very much a Band-Aid presidency, and even the Band-Aids aren't really covering all the wounds. It's some huge, continuing my stupid metaphor, like the ones where the blood's pouring out and you're drowning in the blood, but maybe not the scratches and the scrapes and other stuff. But it's interesting because, like, you're right, like there's no long-term, the Biden administration as of yet has not put forth anything that has a long-term effect on our country. And I don't know, what I seem to think is like, this is a way to, maybe behind the scenes, they're talking to whatever forces in Capitol, say, listen, we have to do XYZ thing, hence that letter with Goldman Sachs. But back to business once we get through. Once the wounds heal, we'll go back to program. The neoliberal experiment. Does that, and just speaking in human speak right now, does that seem to be what they're doing, their strategy?
Yeah, I mean that's I think broadly my sense. I mean this is crisis spending. I mean it's worth noting that Biden's stimulus, the first part of it anyway, bigger than what Obama passed, but the crisis is also considerably worse. So it has to be seen, I think, to some extent relative to that. I think, I only wrote this piece a month and a half ago, something like that, maybe a little more than that, but, only weeks have gone by since I wrote this piece. And I actually think the argument I think people are more receptive to it now. I think, we're having this conversation on a day when there's been this announcement about this bipartisan bill. And this seems like such a good example of how the Biden presidency, despite a few kind of early differences in rhetoric and things like that. Biden aligned himself with the PRO Act and, that kind of stuff. In spite of those things, this is such an obvious return to type. This is, I think there's a view in Washington, and if anyone's synonymous with this view, it's Joe Biden, a view that bipartisanship is kind of an end in itself. And that if you can call something bipartisan, that's very politically savvy and the public will absolutely love it. And from what I can tell, I mean, there's, I think, conflicting reports on this, but it does seem like as a lot of Democrat-aligned groups are really pushing voting rights stuff in the form of HR1, I guess now S1 in particular. That kind of stuff is not. It doesn't seem to be a big priority for the Biden administration. According to one source, I think quoted in the Atlantic, it sounds like the administration really sees passing legislation of the kind, the kind that was tabled today. Also, we're still waiting for some of the details. Legislation like that, with bipartisan support and kind of mitigating political conflict with the Republicans, and that they think that's the best way to hold on to the House and Senate in the 2022 midterms. I mean, we've seen this movie before, and we know exactly where it ends. So I feel like there's more and more of a reversion to type, kind of with each passing week.
One thing that I really don't understand is, if you really wanted to play bipartisan games, why wouldn't you get rid of the filibuster? I feel like that creates the opportunity for bipartisan. I mean, that's where you really, I mean, obviously the Democrats would have enough votes to pass things and move things through. But if we do lose the Senate, if Democrats lose the Senate, which is very likely, then you're really going to have an opportunity to exercise bipartisanship, and vice versa. And that's where Joe Biden can be the true bipartisan president, is putting on his LBJ hat, whatever it is, and doing so. That to me, like, I don't understand why. I mean, what happened a couple of days ago with these voting reforms, as 150 plus voter restrictive bills are just ravaging the country and the state legislatures that Obama completely ignored, investing in the Democratic. I mean, this is, I don't buy it. I feel like it's not just about some sort of conditioning or bipartisanship or neoliberal economic philosophy. The voting reform to me is just, it's beyond, like, it's reprehensible. I don't know. I mean, it's democracy, no?
It should be completely non-controversial, and even there, you're seeing the language of bipartisanship creep in. You've seen it deployed by Kirsten Sinema, by Joe Manchin as well, kind of explaining their opposition to getting rid of the filibuster, and in Manchin's case, opposition to HR1. Yeah, it's pretty perplexing. I mean, you'd think that passing the voting rights legislation would just be you'd think it'd be a no-brainer, because you'd think it'd just be out of sheer political opportunism the Democrats would want to do it. But I think that the filibuster is just seen as too valuable a mechanism by some people to kind of seriously challenge. And again, I don't see as this, you've heard rumblings about the filibusters make it impossible to govern, et cetera, but what's really being done to kind of rein in these dissident senators who want to keep it? And I think that the cynical view on this, and I think there's probably a lot to it, is that the filibuster is the perfect excuse for centrist Democrats, because in situations like this, which form the majority of this is the dynamic that usually exists when Democrats are in power now. These kind of thin congressional majorities for the first few years, and then they're in the minority later, even if they hold the White House. The filibuster kind of allows them to. You can come out and have the president give a State of the Union and align himself with the PRO Act, with these kind of social democratic reforms, a public option, whatever, in the full knowledge that they're not going to pass, and that there's not going to be a concerted effort, at least from the top, to pass those kind of things, and that dynamic is. It really encapsulates the strange and ultimately pretty incoherent coalition at the heart of the Democratic Party, which, is the party of a lot of these public interest groups, and which has a very broad voter base, but, is also a party of Wall Street, a party of Silicon Valley. And so the filibuster is kind of the perfect way of mediating between those two blocks, in a way which obviously favors one rather than the other.
What do you think Joe Biden's pressure points are?
I mean, in what sense? In terms of how he could be moved on things?
Yeah, I mean, so for instance, if you want to get a filibuster reform, these voter laws, for instance, are, I think there's a key base of voters that, many have stepped up and called them out, loyal Joe Biden folks. And, when the filibuster blocks these kinds of voting reforms, suddenly you're angering a base that you need, that is reflective of the Democratic Party, many people of color who come from states where they're really like ravaging, voter restrictive, voter ID laws, et cetera. So to me, that seems like a natural pressure point. If you build a coalition with folks like that, would be his normal base. I speak because, like, in New York, we had this thing called the IDC, the Independent Democratic Conference.
Yeah, of course.
Which just for folks to know, was eight Democrats elected in very Democratic districts who, per design by Andrew Cuomo, were literally caucusing with Republicans and exchange getting bigger offices, larger staff, committee positions, and it was keeping the Democratic Senate out of the majority. Ultimately holding up all legislation that was slightly progressive from reaching Andrew Cuomo's desk. So it's a similar dynamic. It's not exactly the filibuster, but similar dynamic in that there was something, blocking legislation. And we as a movement had to build a coalition, the left, with, a lot of normie Democrats who just woke up one day after Trump and realized, wait, we're not a Democratic state? And wait, this is blocking, codifying Roe v. Wade, like very obvious pieces of legislation that were not, economic justice, like reform, it wasn't rent relief. And so that was a coalition right there. And that was a pressure point to highlight, and they were voted out, which was great. But I mean, is there an opportunity like that with Joe Biden is what I'm asking.
Well, I mean, there's no one simple trick. And I mean, the answers to your question, I don't think are, I mean, they're not particularly satisfying because to some extent they're all kind of very like, incrementalist and sort of long-term answers. I mean, in the short term, I'm very encouraged by, I think in the first months of the Obama presidency, really the first few years of the Obama presidency, especially, there was just a default posture of deference towards the administration. It's like whatever it did was sort of almost assumed to be like, this is the best thing we're going to possibly get. I mean, I think one example that comes to mind was, Obama was going to make it easier for workers to unionize. And when that sort of dropped off the agenda, labor leaders, for the most part, at the AFL-CIO and other places were not, I mean, they just kind of shrugged and were like, well, we're glad to have a pro-labor Democrat in the White House. And, that's about all we can hope for. I think you see less of that these days. I mean, partly because the, institutional and elected left and the kind of progressive side of the Democratic coalition is more powerful. It's larger than it once was. You see things like, House Democrats, like Jamal Bowman and AOC and others. At least a few weeks ago, they were saying they were going to, they would withhold their votes in the House, where the Democrats only have a 5-seat majority. If certain criteria weren't met. So things like that encourage me. In the long term, I mean, I think, primarying Democrats, centrist Democrats, right-wing Democrats, particularly in blue states where there are, where there's no excuse to not there's the centrist argument that's like, well, we have to run these people because, we have to run these compromise candidates because that's the only way you can get elected. I mean, how do you sustain that argument in New York? How do you sustain that argument in California, or these places that are, or, Rhode Island or wherever, places that, send Democrats to Congress all the time. So, the pressure points at this point, at least the obvious ones, the conventional ones, I think are there are more than they were at the start of the Obama presidency, but are still unfortunately quite limited, because the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and the extra parliamentary left, if you want, is not powerful enough. But it's a lot more powerful than it was, and I think we're kind of seeing that reflected in some of the debates around this stuff, which weren't really being had in 2009.
Before we wrap, who would be if the filibuster were to be magically eliminated tomorrow, who would be the new, IDC in the Senate?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's a really good question. You can imagine like, some new caucus forming that, includes like Joe Manchin and Chris Coons, but like also Mitt Romney or something. And they would call themselves, I mean, I guess all the good names are taken. There's already a problem solvers caucus, isn't there? But they would call it something like that, the solutions caucus, maybe.
Okay, so no names. I mean, at least on the Democratic side, we know Chris Coons, we know obviously Joe Manchin. Would Dianne Feinstein join? Would Chuck Schumer join? Probably not, because he can't. But it would be an interesting. I just love to see the list of names of.
Oh yeah, I mean, absolutely, and it has to be said. I mean, all these debates around bipartisanship, and people saying, well, I'm not going to vote to get rid of the filibuster because we have to have bipartisanship or whatever. I mean, this has been pointed. I'm not the first one to point this out. There are left-wing members of Congress pointing this out, but a lot of the story behind this stuff, a lot of this is just theater. I mean, a lot of the story behind this stuff, it really is money, and it is the capture of the lawmaking process by organized special interests who do not want. They don't want the progressive agenda to be passed. They don't want a $15 minimum wage, let alone Medicare for all or something like that. They don't want to see a transformative agenda. And so, a lot of these debates around kind of the machinations of the Senate and stuff are sort of adornment for just a much wider issue, which is, one I think a lot of people intuitively understand but feel very powerless to change, which is the fact that the centers of both major parties really are captured by corporate interests, and that's something that early in 2020, at least, it felt like we might have an opportunity to change. I think we're going to have to wait a while on that. Although I'm more optimistic about the prospects than I was before 2016 and before 2020 for obvious reasons.
Warren Buffett is retiring, so maybe there is some hope. Steve Jobs well, I shouldn't say that, not Steve Jobs. Warren Buffett's retiring. Bill Gates is out. What's his name? Elon Musk is he still on the board? Who's the other one that got out?
Bezos is going to space, and there's some
right.
speculation he might not come back. So
that's
we'll
right. See. That's right. If Mackenzie has any opportunity, she's like, the next organization I'm going to fund is the one that's going to blow up Jeff Bezos's rocket to space. I don't know. Maybe that's the end of capital. It's like, yeah, go to the moon. Fine. I'm like, DSA should start a campaign called "All These Billionaires Need to Go to the Moon." Just do it. Have a summit there.
Maybe there is. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there was one simple trick, and it's just send the billionaires to the moon.
I'm like, well, sure. It's their Achilles heel. It's always flying too close to the moon, flying too close to the sun that kills you, and that's it. Luke, thanks so much for joining us. Come back anytime you want to bitch about Biden. We always have a space for that.
Hell yeah, I'm always down. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
All right, take care. We will be right back with Arun Chaudhary to talk about today's news. Tim Cook. Yes, Tim Cook's another one. That's the one I was thinking of. I can't keep track of all the billionaires. There's only like 6 of them, and I still can't keep track of all the oligarchs. All right, we'll be right back with Arun Chaudhary. All right.
Sibilance.
Welcome back to the Nomiki Show. Partners of the committee program. My dear friend Arun Chaudhary is here. Where are you right now, Arun? Your hair looks
Berlin.
great.
I'm in Berlin, and the equipment has arrived, so everything is everywhere. So I apologize if it's a mess.
For those of you who have not been keeping up with the equipment, there was a moment where you thought it was blown up in the middle of the ocean. Am I correct?
Well, look, the Suez Canal, look, we have choke points in our modern capitalist economy. We have choke points. And so wherever you find these choke points, actually, it turns out our system is very vulnerable. And one of the places that it was very vulnerable was in my shipment of, old falling apart film gear that I'm going to stitch together to do great things and make a studio for the committee program. And it's definitely going to sound great because I forgot I have all these sound blankets and these curtains, and it will be, you know what I mean? It will be like a booth within a booth, not these huge booming. We love Charlottenburg for it, but these huge ceilings and it's better for drums than speaking with you.
Well, as somebody who's sitting in a conference room at a law office in Astoria, Queens right now, that is what is happening in my space right now. So before we get to the business and talk about today's news, I want to talk about how we are both going to be in a location in how many days? Let me see, because we're going to announce this, right? This is June 24th. So I think it's what? Circle. Oh, it's like in a couple of weeks. 1, 2, like in 2 weeks, basically 2-3 weeks. We are going to be where? Arun.
We're going to be in the Athenian Riviera. So outside Athens by about outside Athens by about, I think about 80 clicks, something like this.
What?
About 80 kilometers outside Athens.
Oh, is that what they call it? I'm American. I don't know metric.
Well, actually, I'm not. It's not even that I'm European. It's that I'm an old-timey explorer who wears a monocle, and so I need to refer to things as fathoms and clicks, and that's just how it's going to have to be. But it's going to be great, and I'm going to be doing a live broadcast, our first ever live broadcast there for our Bastille Day special, and also it'll just be fun. We'll cook up a lot of stuff. Who you're going to get to meet? You're going to get to meet Albin Kurti, the Prime Minister of Kosovo.
I'm going to get to meet the
buddy.
Prime Minister of Kosovo personally.
Yeah.
God, this is so cool. I can say I know a Prime Minister.
It's going to be awesome.
Do you know, so there's one Prime Minister I really want to meet, and it's the Prime Minister of New Zealand. In one of my mushroom trips, she came to my mind, and in the trip, full disclosure.
As a guide.
No, it was the mushrooms were like, yo, know me, you've got to meet her. And I was like, I do, you're right. I'm going to find a way. And that was like my big lesson was meet her.
That's so funny.
We're going to find her. And I'm going to find probably through the Kosovo Prime Minister because I don't know any other Prime Ministers. Well, actually,
I have one other way to get to her for you. I have one other way to get to her for you, but we can't talk about it on the air.
Okay, let's talk about it later. I'm so excited. Yes. Okay. So that's exciting, guys. We're going to be doing several shows from this conference, which is like a global lefty conference on the Athens Riviera. It's about an hour and a half south of Athens, I would say, just in case you wanted to know the times. And if anybody wants to find us, I guess. I'll be like, we'll be in room 202.
Just count the clicks.
Just count the clicks. All right, Arun. Oh, by the way, Arun Chaudhary is, of course, the host of the committee program, which airs on Mondays right here on this channel. Arun, we have breaking news because we are moving to Wednesdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. Eastern to 10 p.m. Eastern. That is a new thing that we just announced today. So set your calendar because I know you watch us daily. And we will be in touch with you about that soon.
I'm going to hope that somebody emails those things to me because I wasn't really taking it in because time zone math is something you have to do later because you're never sure if you're right if you're doing it on the fly.
I know. I fly out, as you know, and the day that I land, I'm supposed to have this meeting and they were like, what time is it? And I was like, I don't even understand when I land because I'm looking at my ticket and it's like, that's the flight dates are the most confusing ones.
Last week I'll be there. It's going to be fine.
It'll be good. All right. So let's talk about how Meghan McCain hates Bernie Sanders. And I want to talk about this because Meghan McCain.
The specific way she goes for it.
Very specific way. So this is interesting to me because I do know Meghan McCain and I know her from the television world. It's not like we chill just hanging out all the time. She knows I'm a Bernie person. She used to love that I was a Bernie person because that was when Bernie was running against Hillary and she hated Hillary.
Totally.
And now it's I thought she loved Biden. She supported him, and now she's going after Biden. I'm not really sure where she is on everything, but
it seemed if I was her. Okay, we'll talk about it later. We'll watch the.
All right, let's start the clip, and we can just scream stop if there's a point you really want to, because it's a long clip, but I feel like it's
just
worth.
If I was her brand manager, Biden's where you jump on to sort of being an officially right in the center person or whatever, and you're like, I'm really for Biden. I know this man. I trust this man. And it just gets
literally Biden just
like living in New York, you know.
Hang on. Biden just nominated her mom to be ambassador today. So clearly, like, there's something going on there. There's like a whole other sitch happening. So let's roll this clip.
To stand up to the NRA and do what the American people want in terms of this terrible tragedy.
Senator Sanders, you are the godfather of the squad. You were hyper-progressive socialist, and you're talking about social justice before it was cool. But it feels like the squad today has moved even to the left of you. How is it for you to stand by everything AOC, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar have said and done, particularly when it comes to Israel and talking about from the river to the sea and the extermination of Israel as a right to exist? Or do you think the movement, which you started, has moved away from what you envisioned?
Well, Megan, first of all, I don't believe that's what they're saying. And second of all, it's not my job to have to defend every member of Congress any more than it is their job to defend every statement that I make. What I am focusing on right now is the reality that for the last many, many decades, the very rich in America have become much richer, while working people are struggling. Real wages have not gone up in 48 years. And what I'm working on right now is a budget which says to the wealthiest.
So, I mean,
No, you can just pause it on screen. There you go.
The one thing I would say about Bernie, number one, as someone who, and again, everyone's going to be like, oh, he's so shallow when it comes on your show. This is my job, people. His haircut looks great, and this is like a new kind of tie he's wearing, and I think I haven't seen him in a while. You know, like I'm over here in Berlin. So he looks great. He sounds great. I would have preferred that he did a value statement about Palestinians or about the conflict in some way before pivoting. It almost becomes a parody sometimes when you pivot. But for all of that, why are we even talking about that? Meghan McCain, just like, how dare you? And it's not even about the sort of, is Bernie responsible for all these people? It's just this gigantic riot hose that becomes, and I am lucky enough to be Jewish because I get to say it a little louder, but just sort of this using anti-Semitism as a blunt object against progressives. Yep. You know, we saw it done against Jeremy Corbyn. We saw them try to do it against Bernie Sanders the first time. And these people, like your mother told you, they are not your friends. These people are no friend of Israel. They are no friend of the Jewish people. They are no friend of anyone who is a friend of justice.
Well, so this is what's so strange to me. She talks about how they moved to the left, like he's such a fan of justice. She starts with the premise that these are people who are for justice, for social justice. Like that's a bad thing. And then she suddenly equates social justice with the annihilation of the Jewish people, which never was said. I mean, I agree with you on this. I think one thing that Bernie's Achilles heel is, and I'll say it publicly because he needs to work on it. And it's as a white woman, I have a little bit more privilege than some other people might have in saying, as a white woman who was a surrogate for him, you know, you got to stand by your people. And so it's not about pivoting to your message that you just said. It's that not just is this wrong, but Meghan, why are you doing this? Why are you targeting a bunch of women of color who are sitting in Congress right now fighting for what's right? Why are you misstating their thoughts and their beliefs? What's your agenda, Meghan? I'm in the Senate. They're in Congress. They took the risks for their communities. They took their personal risks to run. They get constant onslaughts of hate and threats. And part of that is provoked by people like you, Meghan. So Meghan, here we go. I'm a senator. I know what it takes. I have a little bit more privilege. I've been doing this for a long time. They just got in. Why are you targeting them? Why is Fox News putting them on TV every single day like they're evil? You're doing something dangerous. You're actually instigating more hate towards them based on falsities. And in my book, Meghan, there's no difference between what you're doing right now against the squad and what Donald Trump was doing just a few months ago when he was instigating stuff. You're instigating hate and it's dangerous. And I urge you to stop. And that should have been his response.
That's very good. That's very good. I mean, I would have settled for a 2-sentence, pivot that was more topical, because he is less. He's not a question attacker, which is probably the most useful thing to know how to do. I mean, that's what that was. I mean, it's Newt Gingrich. It's like I'm going to teach the audience something right now. This is the Newt Gingrich way to debate, and if you ever don't know what to do, you just do it very quickly. You attack the question, then you attack the questioner. You say something nice about everybody around you, and then you differentiate yourself. So it's like, that's a terrible question, Chuck. I'm really surprised that you would ask it. Everyone up here is trying to make the world a better place, but I'm the only one who has the experience to get it done. You can just do that formula over and over and over again. And I think the part that's missing from the formula here, though, is is the part where there's a solid value statement. Because this has to be fought with fire, because we can see how sticky and how awful these kinds of accusations can be. And so I do sort of want to see a more concerted effort from people, and it's not Bernie's responsibility to figure this out on his own, but from there to be unified talking points about this that come out not just out of the mouths of politicians, but also out of the mouths of other folks in different communities.
But Bernie actually does have the obligation to do this. I mean, it's not just that he's a senator and he's a leader on the left, but he's also a Jewish man. He has more ability.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
To actually have this conversation in a way that Corbyn couldn't. You know, that's basically it.
I do mean on his own, though, right? There are, there are lots of groups, especially who've been trying to debunk some of the stuff she's saying, like, from the mountains to the sea, all this sort of, all this just weird stuff that you're like, why do these crazy white Christian people know all this weird Jewish stuff? You're like, mind your own business. They're talking about like blood libels and like golems and stuff, and you're like, how do you even know this weird old anti-Semitic stuff? It's not like something that we like think about,
That's really funny. All right, let's play the rest of the clip, because we're just going to keep going with this. This is so much fun. Let's just keep going.
Not gone up in 48 years. And what I'm working on right now is a budget which says to the wealthiest people in this country, you know what? Even if you're a multi-billionaire with incredible power, you're going to have to start paying your taxes. Large profitable corporations will start paying their taxes so that we can, in fact, rebuild our infrastructure, create good-paying jobs, make sure that families can afford childcare, expand Medicare so that elderly people can have teeth in their mouths, be able to hear, and have eyeglasses that they can afford. That's what I am focusing on right now. I think the folks in the progressives in the House are doing a very good job in standing up for working families. It's not my job to comment on everything that any member of the House says. Anymore it is for them to comment on what I say.
Okay. Our thanks to...
And then you get the double frown at the end.
Okay. Our thanks to Bernie Sanders.
It wasn't a good... The plane didn't land elegantly either. Yeah.
No, it was a... it is what it is. I get the View. It's the most popular show on. It's beyond cable. It bypasses cable by far. It's a problematic show. I mean, the other thing, like,
you're trying to be careful, and you end up with a bunch of mush. Yeah,
you end up with a bunch of mush. I mean, also, what I would have said if I was on Bernie's team was demand who interviews me. Like, you want me on the show? Because obviously I bring you ratings too, because I'm Bernie Sanders, and he's on all the time. Okay, cool. I'd only like to be interviewed by Joy or anybody who's not Meghan. You have those abilities to negotiate these things. People think you just like jump. Of course, it's called leverage. Everyone wants Bernie ratings. Everybody wants Bernie ratings. That's why Jimmy Dore is having a meltdown right now. He wants Bernie ratings and AOC ratings. All right. Speaking of that, I want Britney ratings, and I want to talk about what's going on with Britney. Are you okay to talk about that? Are you familiar with it? This is like...
Yeah. Okay. No, I'm familiar with her work and familiar with her current situation.
So just for the audience that does not know, Britney Spears, for the Gen Zers.
Let's start at the beginning.
When I was 15 years old, I was in ski club, and it was the first time my friend had a Walkman with her. It was the first time I ever heard "Hit Me Baby One More Time." And my life changed after that. And that was in 2000. So, all right, let's play this clip of, it's on CNN with Chris Cuomo, because when I think about Britney Spears and justice and, all these things, I think Chris Cuomo.
You're like, get me Chris Cuomo, wherever he is. Find him and bring him here.
We can't get Andrew? Oh, okay, we'll get Chris. Same thing. All right, let's start this clip.
Good to see you, Counselor.
Thank you. Good to see you. Nice.
And just for folks to know, this is Britney Spears' lawyer.
To your understanding,
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Was Ms. Spears ever adjudicated mentally ill, or was she ever found by a court to be non-compos mentis, or to the uninitiated, not competent mentally to run her own affairs?
The proceedings have been closed and sealed, which raises an important question as to why, but I don't think so. As far as we know, she never was adjudicated as being mentally incompetent. Look, you and I can't decide on this program what, if any, problems Britney has, but what we can decide is there's been a terrible miscarriage of justice. She has really been deprived of her rights, and particularly because she's never had anyone who's advocated for her. She's got a court-appointed lawyer who clearly has not advocated for her. He's supposed to be a zealous advocate for her. And you'll remember at a prior hearing, the judge asked, well, what does Britney Spears think about this conservatorship? And he said, well, Your Honor, she's like a comatose patient who can't even sign a piece of paper to say what she wants. Well, Britney blew that out of the water today.
And is that your understanding as well, that she's had her ups and downs, she's had struggles with mental health, but that she is not some vegetable or non-compos mentis, meaning not able to think for herself and do for herself?
Yeah, it's really fascinating because, look, when I met with her a couple of times and we spoke on the phone when she retained me, I thought she was making sound judgments. Clearly there were issues, but she was making some sound judgments. She understood that she had these issues, that a conservatorship, at least on a temporary basis, might come to pass. The one thing that she was clear about was that she did not want her father to be in control of her life. And what we've seen in court documents that have been leaked to the New York Times in the last couple of days, and certainly in her statements today, is this is not somebody who is so non-compos mentis that a conservatorship should be appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, look, sometimes with kids.
Okay, let's pause it real quick. So,
and just from a media training perspective, Goodwitch Jordan Peterson, what's his name, the lawyer, he did a really good job of sort of correcting where he thought the interview was going wrong from the beginning, but without ever being unpleasant. Like, it's kind of almost a masterclass in that. Like, what a good job he did of just sort of like, we're still friends, but I'm going to put the train on a different track, and like, we're going to see how that works for us both.
Yeah,
because
I mean, and don't
Chris
forget,
came
like,
out swinging.
He was ready to go. Yeah, and he's misogynistic too. I mean, there were a couple lines in there like, the mental health. Clearly, she has mental health.
The way he said non-compos mentis. Just for all, let me explain what the Latin is for all of you.
Because I'm a lawyer, in case you didn't know. That not only am I a TV host, I'm a lawyer, and that's why I'm on this show. Not because my name's Cuomo and my dad was the governor and my brother's a misogynist, maniacal governor.
And the other thing that I want to say about this is it's like, without coming across too much like a tanky, is just like we do need just sort of more federal standards on general things. Like your hair would stand on end to hear stories that happen in some states where people are forced to, raise babies next to people who have done criminal acts against them.
Oh, yeah.
Where, people are essentially indentured servants who have to work for other, there is just these sort of individual idiosyncratic ways that we let states do things result in these really, really bad outcomes. If you look at family courts across America, you really, I think, would push for some federal standards there.
Well, so I had a friend who actually was working for a law firm. It might have been his law firm. I'm not sure which one it was, when the conservatorship first started. And I'm going back 14 years hearing these stories. This is when this all started popping up. I immediately thought of my friend who is now an attorney, an entertainment attorney himself, but he wasn't, I don't even think he was in law school at that point. And he was involved on the phone calls, just listening to them and with the family. And I had never heard anything like this before. He was like, she can't make any decisions. And then there was one thing he said, and I don't think but she can work. That's important, right? So she can't make any decisions, but she can memorize all of her pop songs, do these complicated dance routines that none of us can do. She's she can operate
Vegas show is more than any of us have in us. Believe me.
Exactly, multiple days a week. It's such a remnant of old school Hollywood when they literally would. I don't know if any of you have ever listened to these stories of Lucille Ball and these other.
They worked these people to death.
To death. They were products. And not only did they, most of them have to have sex with Louis B. Mayer and these studio executives, but they would work them to death. They would, what's her name? So famous, whose daughter is, oh my God, Wizard of Oz. What's her name?
Oh, Judy Garland.
Judy Garland. I mean, Judy Garland is a perfect example. I mean, this is somebody who developed, they got her on pills when she was like 6 or 7, so she could work these insane hours. I mean, it's exploitation. And so this is, a very similar situation in which, I mean, who knows what if she was put on drugs or not. A conservatorship is an excuse for them to take advantage of this person's talent. And of course, parents have been grooming their children.
Yeah.
It's a financial scheme, and he should be held liable. He should be put in prison, frankly, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk about the amount of time we're talking about. This is a long time to have someone just taken out of their lives and made into this sort of extremely productive workhorse. And again, this has been said by many people in many ways, but this is what's happening to one of the most famous women on the planet. Now you're black and you're in Arkansas and you're like working at the governor's mansion or something.
Yep.
You know, like how's that working out
the
for
Clintons, yeah, exactly. The forced slave labor. And on that note, when my friend worked at this law firm, it was right after Britney had shaved her head, and everyone thought that Britney had lost her mind. Right? Turns out someone had advised her. This is third-hand knowledge, so please just take this with a grain of salt. Potentially, someone had advised her that to shave her head would actually prevent a drug test. So she was like from smoking pot, not like anything, severe.
Yeah. It's in the roots, blah blah blah. All this, yeah. I've been told the same thing.
You've been told the same thing. That's why you've never shaved your head.
No, what are you gonna do?
No, but I mean, ultimately, the reason why I wanted to bring this up is I actually do think, this is resonating with so many people, and just taking it from a 30,000 foot perspective. Arun, why is it at this moment this is resonating? And obviously that has given Britney leverage too to speak out.
It's resonating because of, the industrial communications complex that we live in, and that's what's happening right now. I don't mean to sound dour about it, but I'm not sure this is a turning point in anything any more than Kesha, having her sort of very public fight at the exact same time as the campus rape documentary won the Academy Award. There was like a confluence of things that also made that it was like, oh, wow, this is happening to Kesha, it's happening to everyone, and we're going to really do something about this. And I'm not totally sure that this was as big as we wanted it to be. I worry that this is going to be another thing like that, especially, given that it's in the news cycle sort of before the summer of chaos and hedonism that we're like headed for. So I do think that those who work so hard around mental health awareness and around awareness of these laws have their work cut out for them in the next few weeks to make an absolute monster out of this molehill, or to lose the moment to Lord knows what, something that's less important than, the actual life and control and death in our families. Like this whole thing, it's people have made us a lot of weird meddlesome laws,
Yeah, no, I think this is a great opportunity. I mean, maybe in states like New York or California where there's some great leaders. I'm not saying that all the legislature is, but there's at least a supermajority and there's some great leaders, and it's really hard to kind of run away
and pass
from
some things that are modeling for what a national thing could be to just get the momentum going on that.
Bingo. Arun, awesome seeing you. See you on a Monday, the committee program. What's on the committee program this Monday?
We are talking to Emily Kenway about modern slavery, so I think maybe some of these issues will come up. We have these really cool kids. Can you see this? It's like a hammer and sickle, but it's pixelated.
Oh, cool.
Ciao Nonna. This is the Pensioners Union in Italy. So they have social media whiz kids. So it's a young-old alliance where they just pump out memes with like Stalin in them and stuff, and it's hilarious and it's working. So I think they've cracked a code on something, and we're gonna have a chat with them. And then we have a segment that I don't think you're gonna like as much, to be very honest with you. But it's gonna be called Keeping Up with the Habsburgs for all the royal watchers out there. We're gonna let you know what some of the modern Habsburgs are up to in Europe, from race car driving to running for small-time office.
Why would I not be into this?
You'll see. You'll see.
Oh my God.
Although you have to admit the sauna worked out fine and it was extremely classy.
We'll talk about it offline. I do like a good
extremely
schwitz.
Classy.
I love a good schwitz, but no,
All right, you got to do your shout outs, right?
I got to do my shout outs. We will see you on Monday. Go check out committee program. And then in a few weeks.
And then are we going to change times? Is this something that we're going to talk about, like
we'll
over the weekend or something?
Offline with the Habsburgs.
All right.
We'll talk about it. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Arun. And here we go. Here are our shout outs. What do we have here? N. Shay writes on YouTube, Nomi looks like she's broadcasting from Atlantis. Just needs air bubbles. Yeah, it is a little, I mean, the thing is I don't have my normal lighting here because there's these huge windows. So I think it's just the way it's all playing back. E. Smith writes on YouTube, Biden said the black vote helped him win. He may want to aggressively push for HR and S1. Agreed. That was why I thought it was a pressure point. Ick1 in Trunks. Am I saying that right? Ick1 in Trunks writes on Twitch, need a Canadian DSA. All right, when that happens, just like give me a shout out. That's all I care about. I don't need credit, I just want a shout out. Rayleigh says with a super chat, thank you so much, Rayleigh. Looking forward to the format change. Changing to Wednesday, Friday evening show would be great for me as it gives my big head relief from being squeezed by headphones for 4 hours straight watching Majority Report and then your show daily. Thanks. I appreciate that. You're right. That's a good, okay. So we initially thought being after Majority Report would be great, but I see where that works now. Smart thinking. LD writes on YouTube, good night. Is every great moderator person here right now? Seriously, great moderators in this chat. I agree. What time is it over there, LD? Like, it's nighttime, but we have the most amazing moderators. Thank you to our moderators. Thank you to everybody working those algorithms. Thank you for taking on the trolls because we know they exist. So we always appreciate you. Champagne Communist writes on YouTube, I'm starting to see a correlation between good hair and good politics. Oh, is that a run or is it my hair? Or is it both? Fun fact, in high school, I was voted 4 things. One was best hair. I'll take it. I don't know about it anymore. I think it's getting fried because I'm dyeing it. All right, what else do we have here? Class time, what's up? I saw your text message, class time, by the way. Secret class time. It says on Twitch, reacting to the Bernie McCain clip, who's this old guy? I like him. I'm assuming it was not a run. I'm assuming it was Bernie Sanders. All right, everybody, we appreciate you. Tomorrow is Femme Friday. Last day at 3 p.m. Eastern on Twitch and YouTube. And then after that, we're going to Wednesdays and Fridays. So make sure to mark your calendar. You will get all of the programming. You'll get just as many hours. Isn't that crazy? So we were like, how do we do this so that we keep our patrons satisfied? You'll get just as many hours and programming, just consolidate a little bit because it just became very hard. I'll be honest. But I think it'll work out. So share it with the world. Make sure to subscribe, like, join us on Patreon. And for the patrons, I know there's been a little bit of a glitch with our release. We're getting those all uploaded again. I think there's something that was not syncing up. So we apologize to you if you have not had a couple of episodes in the last week or so. But they will be up and you'll be able to catch up. All right, take care. Stay in solidarity. See you tomorrow for Fun Friday.
The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. Yeah. We clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, fake fed. Everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki